All right, we're here finally. This is the culmination.
Where's here?
Wait, I'm telling you. Of a year and a half of hard work by Dennis and the family and everybody else in Speedway. And we are at the Museum of American Speed. And why is this important? Because we finally have the tribute tee next to Ed's original tee.
With that grandson of
Look at
the
that.
original
Yes.
car.
This is a tribute to the original car. And it's amazing that it's in here. When you see the both of them, you can really see the lineage and different decisions that you made, but they're the same almost. I mean, it's
It's from the
fantastic.
same bloodline, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely the same.
It really is. So, I mean, it's just like people, you know, you have kids, you see the similarities in them. Well, they're there, like you say, lineage, but
Yes.
just a little newer.
And then the other thing that we discovered is because I'm more of a race car guy, I've always been. And when I first worked at Isky and went in there in the summers, in high school, I would see that car in the corner before it was in a museum. I was like, man, that's an old car. It's not like a 67 Camaro that I want or whatever, but getting to do this project, I really have a big appreciation of how groundbreaking that car was in the late 30s. It was amazing what they did. And of course, Dennis has to point all these things out to me, since he's the real builder, hot rodder. But the amount of things we learned doing this was pretty amazing. And even you gained a respect for how far ahead that he was. So
I have a respect for history already, but it was like when I looked at the car originally last year, year before last, it's like this guy was so ahead of his time. It's crazy. I mean, that was done in the early 40s, late 30s.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how advanced it was, but you know that made it extra special for me. I love history, but I love groundbreaking stuff, you know, innovative stuff, which this whole museum is filled with.
That's what's
what I
amazing.
like about
Yeah,
it.
to be in the company of all these other cars is fantastic.
Oh, it's
and the
crazy.
display that they made here with Ed's original car and having this and John Athens' car, which they grew up together. That was originally John Athens' car, and they built it together. And then John Athens has his famous car here, the Elvis car they call it. And to have a new tribute tee in the same area is an honor.
It's very much an honor. So this is like the highlight of my career. I built a lot of nice, high-dollar street rods and hot rods, race cars.
Yeah.
Nothing compares to being in the company of these cars in this museum.
Yeah.
It's super special for me.
I mean, as a company, not personally, but as a company, to see the original T and what we've accomplished here with the modern engine, modern package, a little more modern styling, and our own take on it, but yet we're still a family company after 76 years.
Yeah.
And to be able to do this and have the DNA of something that people can see now that we can do is fantastic. On a personal level, I just think it's the coolest thing. I learned so much during the build about hot rodding and history and Ed's history. It's pretty fantastic.
I mean, think about how many family companies, family-owned companies still exist. The name's still out there, but you know, Ed still reports to the office.
Yes, he still
There's
comes
just
in,
nothing like that.
comes in every day and asks questions and everything. And when he put his hands on this car at SEMA and he saw it, one of the first things he said, I was asking, are people still really interested in these old cars? He was amazed that people still have an appreciation for it. So I thought that was pretty cool that he was excited about that and got his hands on it and all that. And we're hoping to get him a ride in it not too long.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. That's the icing on the cake for me.
Yeah,
To see Ed sitting in that car.
yeah. See him seeing it and talk about it now is a really cool thing.
I wish that he was here so we could have a conversation of how I did this and how he did that. You know, I'm basically copying his lead, but you know, again, it's got its own spin. But it would be really fun to compare notes with them side by side.
The funny thing you mentioned later was of all the stuff that you did, it was the trim around the top that he said that was one of the hardest things that they did.
It really was. And for us, that was last minute.
Yeah.
That was the day before we loaded it in the trailer. And that's kind of the way the whole car was. The valve covers, we did one shot. We didn't have the time to do, oh, this valve cover didn't come out good. Those are the ones that we poured and they're on the car. I mean, they had to work the first time.
Yeah.
Same with that trim. Debbie had to order just enough trim to do it. And Nick and I had to bend that and make it work the first time. And it sounds easy, but it really isn't.
No, it's very difficult. And you'll see videos of different stuff from the build now that they'll be rolling out. But it's amazing, like casting the valve covers or the dash. It was some hard stuff.
That dash, you got to look at it. Before we leave, like Joe said, I'd like to take a tape measure and compare the two of them, because all we did was we had pictures. We didn't have a dash to go by. We had pictures that we took here in the museum. And when I stand back there and look at the two of them, it's like those are almost interchangeable.
It's amazing how
we
they
got
turned out.
fortunate. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that we really like is we ended up getting an actual 23T that we used as the donation car for this. So the same year as Ed's and everything. So a family actually bought that car in 1923, drove it, and we ended up with it, and here it is, 101 years later.
The rest of the car is sitting behind my shop.
Yes.
And I look around here and I see stuff. It's like I could do that with the rest of the car. You know, I may put something together. You know,
do something with that
just
car.
a hot rod out of it.
Yeah.
But that to me, that makes it. The car has a soul. Everything in here has a soul. I mean, if they could talk, think of the stories. It reminds me kind of the movie, you know, the cartoon Cars.
Yeah.
But it's real life. Those things. So somebody actually sat in that car. You know, how many somebodies
Yeah, how many
sat in
families?
there and they're long gone. You know, unfortunately, that car is 100 years old. So, but somebody, we look at it as kind of a joke almost. You know, you and I have a hard time fitting in there.
Yes.
That was a family.
I don't know why, but yes.
Yeah.
We do.
Because people 100 years ago must have been
They're
this
a
tall
lot
and
smaller,
this big around, yeah.
I would say. Yeah. Me and Dennis, when we were riding together, and we're just shoulder to shoulder, basically.
And I can barely get my knees up to work the clutch. And the car isn't channeled over the frame like some. So you really got the same room that they had in 1923.
What's crazy is I asked Ed about why there was no seat belts or anything, and why the steering wheel was so far back in his. Ours is a little more forward. And he told me it was like that's what held him in. He went 140 miles an hour in that. I don't know how he did it. They were crazy. And the only thing holding him in the car was the steering wheel. And he said if he flipped, he wanted to be thrown out. That's why they didn't have seat belts or anything like that.
There's a lot to that. I mean, so we're driving this one. You know, we went out on the highway the other day, Alex and I, we estimate we were probably doing 60, 65 based on traffic. And it was really stable and fun to drive, but I got to thinking, what if somebody T-boned us, or what if somebody stops? Because this happens in modern day all the time.
Yeah.
Somebody stops in front of you and it's like, will this thing really stop fast enough? It would be scary. So I was thinking about Ed, you know, 140 miles an hour in that car. We're doing 60 and it's like, it's over
Sketchy.
double that. Yeah, I mean, it's really, so Alex just went 236 miles an hour at the Salt. You know, we're used to those numbers nowadays.
Yeah.
140 miles an hour in that is really brave.
Late 30s.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Those guys are daredevils.
yeah.
They don't realize it.
It puts it into perspective for me. If you drive something like that and then think of the numbers, it's really big guts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More than good. Yep.
I guess we'll try it. Are we gonna try that?
Well, we're gonna try it. I'm gonna watch you guys try it and see how fast you get up to.
Maybe we'll let speed.
I feel like 80 miles an hour in this is gonna feel like 300.
It will.
I mean,
It might not be as bad on the lake, and I haven't been to the lake, so I don't know if it's smooth like the Salt.
Yeah.
Is it smooth or is it rough?
Yeah, it depends on what it was.
We have to do a little suspension adjusting so we don't bottom anything out and then fly across it. I mean, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And then, because we really said we wanted to put the dash plaque on there legitimately with the same number.
We have an original dash plaque from the 50s, just like that is on Ed's car that he used to stamp when you got a time. And so we're gonna go out and run it and try and clock it and put that on the dash. But I don't think we'll be going 140 though.
Yeah, you're gonna be beside filming. Meg's gonna be hanging out the window filming, and we're gonna be going.
Yeah, then we'll
140.
that'll be something else.
Right? Have you ever hung out the window at 140?
No, thank God.
She's still here.
All right, so what I figured we'd do is we walk around the two cars and point out some of your design aesthetics and why you made choices on what we changed to modernize it, and talk about the engine, the interior, and all that stuff. So let's take a break and then we'll do that. Okay, so we're here and we've got the car a little bit closer to the original here. And one of the big things that we started off with, which you got the body of course and took that off of the LT, but was deciding on a more modern wheelbase, something a little bit different that would work with the engine and our overall look that we want.
So there's a couple things that dictated that. One, the length of this engine as opposed to a flathead. That made the front have to be out further. But the big factor was I used a quick change back here. I thought it'd be cool, you know, that has a banjo rear end, like a Model A or 32 rear end. I don't remember what I decided on. But so you got the ring gear and a banjo housing around it. It actually looks like a banjo. It doesn't stick out as far as our quick change does. So I wanted the coolness of the quick change just to make it stronger and more modern, you know, the ability to change gears with this quick 5-speed transmission. Well, that made me have to move the rear axle forward. And I actually questioned, I think I sent you a
Yeah, you sent me a couple different pictures.
yeah, there's an option. I could cut the back of the car out and leave the quick change sticking out behind the car. You know, when it's just a bunch of parts on the table, which you do, or move the rear wheels forward. One of the iconic things about Ed, if you look at it, it's like it's stretched so long. So Ed's was a 105-inch wheelbase. That's a long car. That's almost drag strip.
Yeah.
But he did that because it works. High-speed stability, you know, out on the dry legs, that added to the stability of that car. So we had to go back and forth. If I move the front wheels forward to keep the wheelbase, because if you shorten the back, if you move it forward and leave the front where Ed's is, then now you've got T-bucket.
Yeah.
It looks kind of 60s. So, you know, it's hard to tell, and I'm really impressed with that. We're looking at the two cars, and you got to look closely to even see that. We're 102-inch, Ed's 105-inch. I moved the front wheels forward from his and moved the back wheels forward. So it's kind of like the whole cab has been moved back is what it amounts to.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I mean, it made a big difference as far as when you were sitting up the wheels. And really, it was just two wheels and the body on some rails.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Put them on jacks and rolled them back and forth till we got a position.
And the thing is, because you started at 103, 102, you went to 99, and then, but you could definitely tell from a design point of view that was the perfect dimension that we thought.
Well, I'd stand back, I'd put it, you know, 99 gets closer to a modern T-boat.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, that's not going to work. So there's a lot of things like that involved. Now, that's something that we designed and had to agree upon, and it has some constraints, the engine and the rear end. The rest of it, this part right here, you can pretty much take off and put over here, and nobody know the difference except
The
for
windshield
the
will
paint.
fit, everything will fit.
I stand here and I look at the interior, and, you know, I took pictures and measurements, and I didn't make it just like it. Our seat is more ergonomic. It's got lumbar down here, it sways with your back. Back in those days, they didn't understand that quite as much. Even though Ed is super advanced, I was really blown away by the lumbar padding down here, not lumbar, the bolster down here. It was very comfortable as opposed to a lot of seats were just flat. But there's a little more modern version of that over here.
The same, but a little more updated.
I love looking in that corner right there, and you see those pleats disappear, just like you do in this car over here. It's just...
Yeah, the attention to detail is amazing. Even the trim on the floor, on the rug is the same. Yeah, this where it disappears is exact.
Yeah, see how that goes into the corner, just like that car. I can see both of them here. It's just...
And the coloring, to pick the right coloring was amazing. What was really interesting is, like I say, I'm not really a hot rod, I'm more of a race car guy, is I went to the shop to see the update on this, and they had a couple cowhides on the ground in the shop, and I was like, wait a minute, this is actual leather from a cow.
That's actually awesome.
Yeah, and then I was like, oh no, that's a lot of work. They have to cut it and sew it, and Debbie did that along with me.
You know, we could just go to Walmart and buy it, right?
My wife was like, oh my God, poor Debbie. It's hard to sew jeans. I can imagine sewing this thickness and putting the padding and everything.
Dad says it.
I mean,
Not Debbie.
Yeah, poor Dad.
oh, poor. What's crazy is that, I mean, I don't know how you guys figured it out. I mean, it's perfect. It just fits in there.
The funny thing is you have swatches, you know, we have our leather samples, and, you know, it may not be the color that we'd actually choose, but when we're sitting there looking at them, it's like, you know, red Edge is almost a red color.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the closest thing we could get to it with the samples that we had, and I'm very pleased with that. You know, that's an aged version.
Yeah, it's aged, like the carpet.
His was probably a little more red or darker brown maybe, but it's okay, it's close enough.
Yeah, it is very, very close.
And the carpet, I haven't even thought to look at that.
Yeah, the carpet and the trim.
That's what they call English wool, I believe. This is very close to the same. The color is close to the same. This is more of a fuzzy carpet, but you know, it works. They're kind of the same color. We didn't put the the piping on, and I'm gonna let you in on a secret.
Yes.
So that piping around there, we did that I didn't use it for one main reason, because I don't know how.
Really?
I've never done
Of
that.
all the interiors
I
you've
didn't
done.
want to learn, I didn't have time.
Yeah.
Nobody does that anymore.
Yeah.
You have to be recreating something from the 50s, so it's not in our car on purpose. I just don't know how.
It's amazing.
So when I looked at this, I was a little bit worried I was gonna have to learn, and I don't have time to learn new stuff.
One of the other big things that we talked about was how Ed shaved this. You were more of a purist and liked the tall normally.
No, I did, and I do still.
Mm-hmm.
But since we've done ours, again, the tall makes it look like a 60s tea bucket.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really good example of a 60s tea bucket up front, or another section of the museum. And I really like that look, because that's kind of what I grew up with. When we built models when we were a kid, that's the Tommy Ivo look is what they had. Ed did this for whatever reason, I don't know. To be different.
The interesting thing about it is it's very pleasing to the eye when you look at the whole stretched out look of the body instead of having this sharp.
Yeah, bathtub.
Yeah. So
it
I
looks
think
like an old bathtub.
just the way between Ed and John Athen, I think just the eye test alone really stands out. And like when you look at our car and how you did it, it makes all the difference in the world. I just think it changes the sight lines completely.
Well, that's what makes the car so advanced. I mean, they were really concerned about little aesthetic details.
Mm-hmm.
And most people weren't back then. It was a what they call it, hoopty, or a gow job, a soup up. They just did, all they did is take fenders off and put multiple carburetors on, make them light and fast. This car was built with, aesthetics in mind. It had to look right.
That's what's interesting is the speed and the aesthetics, the detail, which is surprising when you start to look at other cars from the era. You don't really see that. You see either they went for speed or for show.
Yeah.
And they did both in this car, which is really interesting.
Kind of like John's. So I found out a little while ago that was the first 28 Roadster body, which I can get into the whole story about 28, 29 versus 30, 31. So 28 Model A Roadster on 32 rails, we call it. So that's the first one. Understand the importance of that. They say that's the first 28A on 32 rails. That's been done no less than 1 million times since that car was built because of that car. Mm-hmm. And you don't just bolt on. They have to flatten the rail out to match the body. It's a little bit of work. So that's the groundbreaking car.
Well, even in the windshield is the rear window of a 39 Chrysler. We thought to do that at the time. That's why it stands out so cheap.
I figured that was a boat, honestly. It looks like a boat.
It's interesting, right?
That's a groundbreaking car.
Yeah. But and just as this was the same thing, they both worked on this too together.
Really so I really like when you pointed this out. Look at I knew this was a difference, but he drilled a hole in between. I'm pretty sure that spacing is the same, based on what I just judged. But he drilled an extra hole in between. You know why ours doesn't have that? I knew that when I was doing it. Mm-hmm. Because we bent this stainless the day before we loaded it.
Yeah.
I didn't have time to drill another 40 holes around that too.
I mean, we should qualify this also, is that we came up with this build at SEMA. We met Kelsey at the MTC Media Trade Conference, and that was in end of January, if I'm correct, right? End of January. And then we started this project, and we had to get all the parts together. Dennis literally built the car in 4 months from start to finish.
That's kind of insane, really.
It really
I don't
is.
want to do it again.
It was unbelievable. Yes, you missed a lot of Alex's stuff. You couldn't go to Montville last year to finish.
Missed
the
a
car.
lot of sleep.
A lot of sleep.
I mean,
a lot of stress to see if we can get everything done because it had to premiere in November.
Yeah.
And you actually started doing the rails and had all the parts, and it was what, in June, maybe?
I don't remember the dates, but I'll tell you one reason that it happened. And when we got close to realizing we're running out of time and I couldn't make it to Bonneville, we brought Greg Peterson, my buddy from California, I went to school with. And Greg come in and he helped with the headers and a lot of the little stuff like that. That I just was running out of time, and Greg bailed us out on some of this stuff.
Yeah, that really helped. I mean, it was a whole family deal, and all your friends and everybody would come out.
Then the day that we cast the valve covers, Nick, Alex's boyfriend, fiance, made the plastic valve covers, 3D printed them based on pictures that I gave him. And you were there, and we all got together. I had friends come up from Hot Springs, and we tried cast those valve covers. Unfortunately, it didn't work at that time, but the next day after the party ended, Nick and I rethought this thing, and we made the patterns, and we actually cast 2 valve covers, and that's them, the first 2. Yeah,
and
so
the old sand casting, well, what was really cool is you built your own kiln.
For this.
Yeah, scrap aluminum from around the shop and did it the old way, the way they did.
That's
that
right.
and the dash.
Yeah, the dash, I really, before we leave, I want to take a tape measure and do some measurements, because we did it based on pictures that we took of this dash. And we called around. It's funny how these things develop as they go. A car takes on a personality based on a lot of things. A lot of times it's the parts that you can come up with. But we found Auburn dashes. The Auburn factory is actually in Tulsa, Oklahoma now, which isn't far from us. You can almost build a brand new Auburn with the parts that they have left over. But you know what? That thing will scare you. It's thousands of dollars for old dashes. These things are super hard to get, collectible and desirable. We didn't have the money or the time, and I just couldn't justify. So I gave Nick pictures. Nick worked on measurements. We went back and forth. He printed a 3D plastic one. We made a pattern off of it, glued it to a board, and sandcast it. And guess what? That's the first one that we sandcast.
That's it. We had the crazy thing is, because of the time crunch, everything that in this car was a one-off. Like, it had to be done. If it didn't work, we were in trouble the whole time.
Yep, one time done.
Like, literally, you fired it up to put it in the trailer, right? To go to see them?
Started it and put it in the trailer. We didn't have time to test drive it.
Well, I was gonna hop in here just to add. They say 4 months to build.
Yeah.
You guys are missing a lot of video, because actually the car was built in like a month. Like, the majority of it, like, was built in a month. It was a 4-month process, but the majority of the build, like, I left for work and wasn't home for 6 weeks. When I left, the car wasn't painted, didn't even have body work done. And when I came back, the car was running. Put that together.
Yeah, that's amazing. That doesn't include all the paint work. And I mean, this was the original 23T body, but you cut it up and pieced it out because it was in such bad shape.
So, when it came in, it's like the guys were apologizing that brought it to us, because it was
Rick Sturts and
bad.
crew, which were nice enough to transport it to you.
Yeah. And it was, the whole bottom was rotted away, the door was falling off, had holes and cracks. It was honestly scrap metal. And the turtle deck, I was worried about the body, but I can fabricate, I can do sheet metal. And when I looked at the turtle deck, it's like, I've got to come up with a new one, because it's just too far gone. Well, we did. But the one that we came up with was a 27 style, so it wouldn't work. So anyway, that's the original turtle deck. I replaced one side of the back, only because the other side I stress relieved, cut, shrunk, hammered until I got it straight enough to use, and that just took so much time. I ended up making a new one here. But importantly, this body, every piece from the cowl to the back of the turtle deck fit in my sandblast cabinet, my glass bead cabinet, which is a door this big and it's only this long. So I cut it in this turtle deck is welded together. I mean, it's made together. Well, I cut it in small enough pieces I was able to put it was wintertime, I believe, or whatever it was. I didn't want to go outside and fire the sandblaster up. So I bead blasted every piece of this and then welded it back together. The body was done in sections. So instead of taking it apart, I cut it apart and then welded it back together.
That's a lot of extra work.
It wasn't extra because it was so hammered and so junk anyway that it had to have so much work to start with. But yeah, it came out really good. The body, I have no problems with. There's hash panels, but I hammer welded that stuff. I TIG welded it, ground both sides. Even in the pictures, it's like you can't see the weld. It's not MIG welded. It's TIG welded everywhere, so that'll work good.
Came out beautiful.
David Freiberger had the rear end. We looked at ordering a brand new one.
Yes.
They were way behind.
We would never get it in time.
That's right. So David contacted Alex, I think Alex remembered that David had one, and she contacted him, and he said, "Yeah, I've got it. I'll sell it to you." So it's brand new in the box.
In the box, they delivered it to Isky, and we shipped it over. That was the part we were worried about. That was going to hold everything back.
Yeah. I didn't want to use an early Banjo rear end, not with that kind of, that's 450 horsepower, a modern 5-speed transmission. So that was a good deal. So everything has worked out. All the sand casting, the intake manifold, Ben Strader, I contacted Ben because I knew he was messing with these Godzilla engines. Said, what do we got to do to get one of those manifolds? And I'm thinking we're going to be talking 6 weeks, 2 months.
Yeah.
He said, I'll sell you mine and I'll replace it later.
Yep.
So he had one and he sent that to us, and Holly had all this brand new stuff that they had just developed for the Godzilla, which is the oil pan and the front cover. It changes the oil pump, it changes the timing chain cover, it cleans it up, it uses a Corvette water pump. We got some of the early stuff and put on here, shaved some of the brackets and put it together, and it looks right for this car.
I mean, it's amazing. The stacks of that system makes the car. I don't know what else we could have put on there. Would have worked. I mean, it just all came together.
I originally thought we'd build a manifold and put 3 Strombergs, just like that. But once I got to look, and the part of the port is built into this head, it turns up. Instead of the port being flat on the head like an LS or any other motor, it's actually got part of that port, so they're straight up. The carburetors would have been up here had I done that, and the carburetors just weren't big enough for that cubic inch. So at that point, it's like, as cool as that would be, it just isn't going to be right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of details, like I just standing here looking at the cowl band. That's original T. That firewall originally bolts into a T. So behind this stainless firewall is the original T firewall, and these are put through factory holes, and most of that stuff is. But between the carpet and that stainless firewall is an original 1923 T. So is Ed's. That's done the same way. If you look, the bolts are in the same place. I mean, I bought that piece of stainless rather than making it, and I'm sure Ed did the same thing. That's just they're too perfect to be done on a drill press like some people did. But I really paid attention to a lot of the position of the frame rails on the cowl up here. If you notice that, it's hanging out the same distance on Ed's car as this car. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I was critical.
Yeah, the detail that you did to match up on the rear, the whole suspension and everything. Let's talk about the front, like how you dropped it.
So one of the things, this car is actually, and I can't remember the numbers right now exactly, I believe it's 4 or 5 inches lower than that car. It's hard to imagine, but if you measure from the ground to the top of the frame rail on this car, it's 4 or 5 inches lower than that. So I wanted to create a rake. To me, a modern car needs to be raked. It needs to look like it's going fast. And of course we know from all our racing, the closer to the ground, the better you are. But that's why we did the dropped axle. You can see the bend in the axle here. And this is a forged steel axle. I had an original axle that would have looked closer to Ed's. I think his is an Essex or something.
Yeah, Essex.
But I had a 36 Ford, 37 Ford axle. But I wanted that rake, and I wanted the drum brakes. Because people say, why would you put drum brakes on a modern car? Because even though the engine's modern, it looks old. But the drum brakes, I didn't want to have a fake big brake with a disc brake inside of it, and those drum brakes will stop this car. It's a lightweight car. They're brand new.
Well, we wanted to look as original as we could with just some design touches. I mean, that's why like the engine, moving the coils and stuff, people don't even realize that's a Godzilla engine. It looks so different with all that junk cut off the front of it and all that.
I think it was a perfect choice. I was talking about this earlier. Had we put a flathead in it, I think it would have looked like we were desperate to recreate a car. Yeah, and I don't want to copy it. My other engine of choice would have been a 292 or 312 style Ford motor, the old wide lot. And that would be cool, but there's really no relationship. We're in modern times. We got a car that was built in the late 30s, early 40s, and we're using a 50s engine.
Yeah.
That was, it would have looked right, but it wouldn't have been right. So by using the Godzilla, it's the only modern Ford engine. I didn't want a Camry, what do you call Coyotes or mod motor.
We wanted a single camshaft.
Right. That was in
our new cam line.
So I think that Ford actually developed that motor knowing that this car was coming.
I think so.
It just worked perfectly for it.
And a lot of people don't hot rod them like this, like how we did it, to where it looks like a cool engine.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see the engine that comes out of the crate with all the junk on it.
It looks like a modern engine.
Yep.
Plastic valve covers and coils all over.
Now you look at it now, and that's a hot rod motor.
Yeah,
for sure.
so we got a few questions. We really had overwhelming support for this thing. But even like Joe from the museum here said, he had to convince some companies to get on board with it. When he would tell them what we were doing, he said it raised an eyebrow. It's like, really? I don't know if that's going to be good.
They didn't think a Godzilla motor would fit in something like this or look anything, because they couldn't picture what we were going to do.
How about that? Okay. Because I take credit for that.
Yes, definitely.
It's a vision. It's like, it is. It's almost wrong, but it's so right at the same time.
Yeah, how it came out.
It
Well, the interesting thing for me is that we were here measuring, and I saw you measuring and doing things, but you when you're building this, you're just going purely on what's up in your brain. I find that amazing. Like, you figured out the whole thing before you started, and then you just built it.
And then, so I really did, we blueprinted it, so to speak, reverse engineer
Yeah.
would be a good term for it. And everything that's different about it, I knew it was different, but you have to do that balancing act. Drum brakes, EFI fuel injected 450 horsepower motor, that's wrong. You know, in the world, that's wrong, but it's right, because you've got to take into consideration the car. We didn't weigh it, but it doesn't weigh much. You know, those drum brakes are brand new, they're huge, they're more than adequate to stop the car. But everything that's different, I knew it was going to be different. It's a 32 grill shell. We were actually looking for the Pontiac grill shells, and we found one, and we could have probably found another. But I wanted just a little bit of difference in the headlights. I really pissed one guy off about that. He got really nasty on Facebook. And my problem with it is, in 1939, when they did that, they didn't have a standard to go by. By today, the headlights are just a little bit off looking. You know, it's like almost cartoonish.
Yep.
So nothing wrong with it. But here, I'll put it this way: they did that, it didn't catch on.
Yes.
You know, all the other cars are typically.
When John went to build his next car, they went with lights that are
a little bit lower. His are a little lower,
yeah.
and then they got lower and lower.
Lower and lower, yeah.
So, you know, again, the modern and the old kind of had to blend, and I wanted that. I wanted it to be a little sleeker, and I think it all worked out perfectly.
It does fit.
I think if
that would have been out of place.
If they were up here, it just wouldn't have looked like for this modern of it.
Yeah.
For sure. So everything, it's like the suicide buggy spring front end. I happen to have those wishbones. Those were in my back junk pile from literally 25 or 30 years ago. And I split those wishbones. I went out there and dug them out from under junk. And then you have to re-bend the front for the spring. But that's basically a 35 to 40 Ford front end right there. And that's not what you would do nowadays. A modern T-bucket, the spring is on top of the axle. It just works better, looks better, is easier.
Yeah.
But I wanted to recreate that, and it's very close.
It is very close. Yeah, it came out really good if you look at it.
The way he's got his spring through the grill shell, and that's when I was here, it's like, I'm gonna recreate that. That's gonna be somewhat challenging.
Yeah.
Just to mount the radiator and everything else. That radiator is a unit from Speedway here, and it's basically out of the box. And I cut it up a lot, and then ended up welding it back together where most of it was.
You chopped the top off, right?
I did chop the top off. I thought I had to, but I had to deal with this height of this grill. I measured based on Ed's, and to place it. So I can't tell you how many times I put it up here on boards, leaned it back, pulled it forward, dropped it, raised it, and it took a lot when I had to work around basically the radiator height, and luckily Speedway pulled through. It's exactly the right height. I couldn't get any closer.
Exactly.
I mean, I think I ended up cutting the corners off of it to make it fit in that grill shell. But it's just, everything just worked perfect. It's like it's meant to be.
Well, the interesting thing is how you cut this, spread it out, and filled it in to get that shape and to get over the spring there.
So when I did it, we could have honestly used 132 grill shell. It's almost the same at the bottom, but Ed's was 2 grill shell tops put together to make that unique look. So I wanted to do the same thing. We took 2 steel 32s, cut them, and we just got a video out there about it and made that. And then I put it up there and it still wasn't right. And some people might think it's not right, but I didn't want quite as much of a point as Ed's. So the 32 worked for that. Other than the point, I mean, I'm standing here looking, if this one was pointed forward another 1.5 inches, it really wouldn't look that much different.
Yeah.
So that's what the idea was. But then when I put it up there, it was, you know, a 32 is the same width all the way down. I wasn't satisfied with that. I could tell that Ed's in the pictures have it widens out at the bottom. So I split it all the way down, pulled it apart, and then welded a pie shape in here on both sides to get that tilt. I wanted it to tilt out just a little bit.
And then on the grill here, you had made every one of those pieces and shaped it.
That bar is, that grill is stainless steel bar. I think it's 1/2 inch by 1/8 inch. And I made this is in the video as well, I made this surrounding outer piece and got it bolted into the shells. And then this is always tricky when you're building a grill.
Yeah.
You have to have obviously the same spacing, the same amount of bars. This one has to be dead centered, or if you come out 1/8 of an inch different, it will stand out like a sore thumb. So there's so much involved. I won't say hours, but there's a lot of measuring involved. And you're measuring, it's like trying to find a certain point on a basketball. It's round. There's nothing square.
Difficult. Yeah.
So, you know, I had to get that right, and I started in on, you know, getting the spacing's easy. I put a 1/2 inch piece of aluminum in here. But when you work out and you get over here and you're hand making each bar and you think, if I mess up, if I'm off a little bit and I get over here, you know, 2 days later and it's wrong, you can't fake that. You're just gonna have an ugly grill. So there's just a ton of time in that, and it came out perfect. I'm telling you, when I do these bars, I would measure, I'd make this one, and I'd measure, and I'd make this one.
Oh, yeah.
There is maybe 20 thousandths difference in length.
Between the sides. So
They
you do
would
this. That makes
I
sense.
do this one, do this one, do this one, do this one, and they are honestly exactly the same length all the way through. So it came out like almost like my dad would say a piano. You know, it's furniture.
And the skull, we had fun with
You're
this.
proud of that.
I'm pretty proud of the skull.
Yeah, it is.
We didn't, I mean, since this is a tribute, we didn't want to copy Ed's skull, which we had thought about, but we wanted to do our own twist on it. And we were at lunch, weren't we, when we were talking about this skull?
Yeah,
or
I
something?
think
We were
so.
just sitting at the table eating lunch, and we came up with this piece. And I mean, it's very similar, but totally different. I wanted a more of a rake, like how we did the car to the skull.
More of an aggressive.
Yeah, more
mean
more
look.
aggressive, mean look.
I mean, it all goes with the. So that's Grandpa, and this is the young kid. And he's all hyper and high horsepower. Well, he's naturally going to be just a little bit meaner, and he might have some tattoos and a mohawk.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
you never
it.
know. So
Yeah, so like I got this part because I'm part Hawaiian. Hawaiian warriors, they always had this mohawk thing that came down. It was red, and so that's what made me think about having this piece, more of a warrior and a little bit of soul. So I thought that would be cool.
the really cool thing is we cast a lot of stuff on this, and Ed supposedly cast that in high school or something. I forget the exact story. So we wanted to recreate that, but when it come time, again, we're running out of time. You're there for a very short amount of time. I thought now's a good time to build this skull. We're sitting there at lunch, and I'm thinking, remember I have a shift knob that was a skull, and I was able to go upstairs, dig through stuff, and find the shift knob. I think low car or
Yeah,
somebody.
you knew
made
where it was.
It had
That
a
was
push
crazy.
button in top. And so they had cast this with a button that goes on a low car shifter that you pull back and forth. But so this, we laid out off of a plastic version of that you had, and I cut that out a 1/4 inch plate and started welding. And that's the result right there.
That's how it came.
These veins or ribs, whatever they are, those are TIG welded beads. And they're smoothed out and they're round right now, but I just sat there and daubed and welded those on, welded this 1/4 inch plate to the back of the skull, filled this in and ground it. And I made this on the lathe, shaped it to fit the top of the radiator and welded it together so it bolts on. And you couldn't ask for anything better. That just
No.
worked out
And then
so
when you
good.
look, so if you look at Ed's, it has that flow, which I really love. But the Tribute T has its own character, but I really love this is period correct for Ed's, and ours is a period correct for ours, I think, a little bit.
So I know that somewhere, because I did this in high school myself, I had sand casting in my welding class, and we had a little foundry just like I have in my shop. And some kid somewhere in 1938 or 7 or something took a piece of wood and pocket knife and cut that skull out. You know, I guarantee that's the way that was made. They didn't buy that from China. That was some kid crafted that, and he made a skull. Well, it's bitchin', and it's really cool for the time, but it looks like it ran into a wall.
Yeah.
It's a little plate faced for our swoopy car. So he's straight up and down. As cool as that is, we wanted to change it up just a little bit.
Just a little bit, and make it our own.
Yeah, we have just a little more aggressive warrior looking.
And then what's amazing is they cast their own valve covers in those days, and we thought that was really important to replicate.
Real important.
Really important for the character of the car.
So if you turn around right behind you, there's only 2 sets of those heads.
Maxis.
And you're looking at both of them here. So this maxi head only has 4 valves. So the intake valves on this Flathead are still in the block, therefore they can use a stock Ford manifold, or not Ford, aftermarket, this case 3.2 barrel manifold like Ed's. So that they moved the exhaust valves to the head. And the reason for that wasn't necessarily for performance. As I understand, these heads were built for big trucks, because you had all the trucks were running Flatheads. And when the port comes out through the block, this is the original exhaust port, the exhaust has to flow through the water jacket, so it superheats the water, and they were known to overheat. So Maxi built these heads with the exhaust valves up here. They could raise them out of the water, but it also had some performance benefits, and Ed was smart enough to recognize that. Somehow he got a set of them. There's the other set.
There's the only 2 sets in the world.
Unfortunately, look at this side. You've got the valve covers here. That looks to me more like an airplane motor. And I'm pretty sure Ed looked at that and said,
no thank you.
no, just
It doesn't look good.
That's not my style. That looks like industrial.
Yeah, very similar to how we did it on the Godzilla, is relocating, moving things, putting our own touch on it. I mean, in those days, I don't think there was many people casting their own valve cover and putting their name on it.
Actually, in those days, more people would be prone to cast it, but not many were doing, like you said it right. But back then, casting was kind of like the modern day billet. So now you got the young hot rodders, you do this and you chunk a piece in the middle and push some buttons and it makes it. Back then, that's about how handy kids were. My great uncle was that way. They cast stuff. And that, this is the old school billet, so to speak. It was a hot performance thing. And they've made and I'm just now noticing this for the first, no, I thought that was an adapter. But see, one of the interesting things is they've got a big, thick cork gasket through here. Because there's 2 sealing surfaces for 2 sets of valve covers on this. And I always wondered after I got home, how did they seal that one valve cover? And they used a big, thick cork gasket. See right here, this is what I'm talking about. They had to go through here. I'm not exactly sure. They must have just stacked that cork extra thick right there. But he's a visionary. He looked at that and said, I can't have that.
Yeah.
And somewhere he put 2, I guess out of here, he put his 2 bolts.
In there, somewhere, yeah.
So I wanted the 2 bolts very similar to what Ed's is, and they're very close. We actually had Speedway scanned. We asked them to scan it, and they scanned Ed's font.
Joe had him scan it, and you guys Meg got the font, and then they turned it into they 3D printed it first out of plastic, which was really cool. Put together for the sizing, but he also had to make an adapter for it.
Right.
So there's an adapter on there that Nick made, and then the valve cover.
So
and you cast both of those, right?
Right. The font is the same, but they scanned it. Well, that doesn't digitize it. So Meg took that picture, basically the picture of it, and hand did this to the same exact font. That's literally a copy of this font, which is just incredibly cool. Yep. Ours is a little bit deeper than Ed's, which that's just 2 different people casting. But yeah, there is an adapter. So The Ford head is much different valve cover, and this adapter bolts to the head and it hangs over the cylinder head a little bit. You can kind of see right here. The adapter hangs over, but the adapter bolts on, and it was important that we use these two bolts. So the adapter bolts on, and then the two bolts hold the valve cover on. But right here was a challenge. So the injectors have to be right here. The injector ports are in the head, not the manifold. So we couldn't change that. But if you look, it's kind of cool because the Ed spark plugs are right there.
Yep.
So they both have, there's so many similarities, you know. His injectors aren't there. His injectors are up here.
But you have the same look, the same kind of deal. I mean, it's amazing how close the valve covers end up looking. Now, we didn't have the 3 exhausts, we did the 4, but it's still the theme of it and what we followed. But the great thing is, you figure that's 80 years old.
Yeah.
I guess that's script on that valve cover, and that's a matching set for it.
And it was just as probably a big a challenge for them
To do that,
to cast those valve covers as it was for us to do it, and it's a one-shot deal.
it's one shot.
And remember when we were here, we were talking about, you know, I think Joe and I noticed this together at the same time. We're looking at this point now, what Ed did. He's got a low mount generator over there under that side. And, you know, Joe's pointed out, he's very much a historian. He said, you realize that predates almost everybody's low mount generator? Most, you know, flatheads are up here in the middle, and then they moved them over here when they used 3 2 barrels. Ed could have very well moved it anywhere he wanted, but he hung it underneath into the passenger side. Well, guess where our alternator is?
So we matched that.
And I had to make those brackets and what have you to mount that Power Master mini alternator down there. But that was important that stayed there because that's really, you know, kind of a predecessor to everybody else.
Yeah.
Kind of like John with his 32 rails.
So all the historical important points that were in the original Dennis designed into this car. It's not a cookie cutter. Every single decision that he made with the frame, the suspension, where he placed stuff, the look of it, it all is intended to be a tribute to the original T, which is fantastic. I mean, you literally hand built everything on this car.
Well, the frame started, you know, I placed the body, I welded, I've got a big plate, I've got an 8-foot wide, 20-foot long plate that one is thick that I build cars on. I set the body up on blocks until I got it positioned where I wanted. And I welded stands to the table and bolted it to the body once I had the body put back together from all that work. Once I got the body in a position and rolled the wheels and axles where I wanted, then it's like you start connecting the dots.
Yeah.
So, you know, I started building the front end. I got it put together. I split those old Ford wishbones and made them the right length to copy heads and put them where I needed them width-wise under the body. They're the same.
Yeah.
I mean, they're spread the same. And Ed's got, there's something kind of different about Ed's. His frame rails, because it was an Essex. It was an old Essex car. They run straight back and they're narrower. I spread ours out like more of a modern car, and you see the frame rail under ours. On Ed's, you look underneath, you see a fake frame rail.
Yeah.
He's like, he put his frame rails under there, and people did this back in the day. They used what they had. They didn't have square tubing or rectangle tube like we do. So they used that whatever it is, Essex frame. And he looked at it and he said, that doesn't look good. So he made, and they were actually aluminum shields that mimic a frame rail, but it's out. Well, you actually see our frame rail, so it works out really well.
But it looks the same.
Yep.
But so he did that just for design view. He didn't
For
have to do
aesthetics.
it for aesthetics. So the attention to detail was amazing.
And then once that was all positioned where it needs to be, I started connecting the dots and building a frame. And it's an interesting process, and you know, it's kind of unorthodox. You don't build cars that way, but this is a prototype. So one of the things about one-off cars is every one that you do is a prototype. If I was copying this car, I'd take it back apart, I'd make a jig off this frame, and then we'd make multiples. It'd be really easy.
Yeah, now.
But yeah, the first one is always the hard one. Anything you do, the first one's the hard one, and this whole car was the first of everything for me. And so I built the frame under the body. I built a rear section of that frame, and I built a front section, and I put these together, and then I had to tie them in the middle. And it's just that kind of a process. It's really good. Transmission's not hanging too low. The oil pan did hang too low, and that was an issue because I didn't want to raise the engine. See how low Ed sits in that car?
Yeah.
Ours is actually up higher than his, but if you look at the height from the top of the cowl to the top of the motor, it's not that much different. If I lowered this anymore, we would have drugged the ground.
Yeah.
And
I remember you had to chop the pan and
Yeah.
rework it and everything.
Yeah, the pan is actually cut down from even what Holly did. That's one of the drawbacks of the Godzilla is it's very tall. It just didn't work out right.
But you found a way around it. So we were talking about the wishbones and all that, how you matched it up. Let's open the trunk and look at the rear. You had to make some slight changes, but still, when you open the trunk between the two of them, it's very close.
I'm actually anxious to do that. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to is opening both trunks. Now, when this body came, the trunk wouldn't even come close to working. I mean, we're talking twisted and everything.
Yeah.
But it did have a latch in it, and I didn't have a key, and we looked online, and yeah, you can order keys, but you know, they're off eBay and somebody makes them and it takes some. So I got a piece of tubing out of the junk, turned it down to where it would fit in that hole, welded a little flag on it and welded a washer. It's nothing fancy, but the locks were very easy. It hangs in there. That's how they opened it. And when you hear it click. So that key actually opens that trunk. So this is ours. And I didn't do this is the pitting, the rust pitting that was inside that trunk. And I left it. I didn't want it to be, I want it to be real steel.
Yeah.
You know, I guarantee this one's got similar stuff to it. Not rust, baby, but old. Well, if you cleaned it up, it might have the rust. Look at that, that's pretty. That's a view that I've actually been waiting for.
To see.
So this is the original 23T tar paper underlining, whatever you want to call it, sound deadening. They didn't worry about sound, just basically to keep vibration and what have you down. So Ed's gas tank, this is a pretty important part of it. Ed's battery's under the seat. I didn't want to put a battery under the seat. We had dual exhaust and we got brake lines and all that stuff. So who knows what that tank is. I guarantee in 1939 he didn't put those bungee straps on.
No, that came later. Right.
That could be out of a tractor, it could be out of another type of car. But the important part is that that's where he filled it, and that's where the tank is at. And then it has this little bitty, at the time I thought it was a Model A cross member. I realize now that it's not. It's much more petite, but it is a buggy spring, you know, being this single spring crossways here, sideways. It's a buggy spring cross member. So we ordered an original off of eBay. Somebody had a Model A cross member. Instead of using repop, it's actually an original Ford cross member, and I wanted it there. So the rear end, the shocks, those tube shocks in 39 positioned like that, that was advanced. And I wanted something similar to that. Ed split the wishbones on this rear end just like he did on the front, so they're spread out. But when I say split, instead of being joined in the front, they're spread out about like this. It's for a dry shaft to run through.
Okay.
So ours is actually a 4-link, and it's actually a kit from Speedway. Thank goodness I didn't have to make those because I just didn't have the time. But if you look at that and then look at ours, Joe and Debbie, Joe from Speedway and Debbie, my wife, got together and they came up with that stainless dune buggy gas tank.
Fits perfect.
Man, it just does. So the scary part is how do you get it out of there? You don't.
You don't.
Well, you do, but you have to take the seat out, and I cut the back of the body out. It's not that way on a 23T. That's a solid body back.
Yeah.
I cut it out and finished it in. I can get that gas tank out forward if I had to, but so that's kind of a hidden little compartment there. But Ed's cross member is back here, 5 inches, and so his gas tank's easily accessible.
Yeah.
But since this big bump, this chunk of quick change is sticking back here, I had to move that axle forward, and everything became very cramped in there, and it worked bitching.
I mean, that was the main thing. We didn't want anything sticking out the back. I thought it would take away from the car compared to Ed's.
It would.
So you had to redo all that.
It's very much a balancing act to get the right look. When I scooted those wheels even 1 inch further forward, this is the quick change chunk is so close to the back of the car that I had to cut the flange off of the top and bottom of this just to make it clear. It's so close. If I moved that rear end forward 1 inch, it would have made some things easier, and it just killed the looks of the car. We stand back and look at it and go, I can't deal with it. So we had to move everything exactly right. And instead of the buggy spring, we have the buggy spring cross member, just like Ed's car. You see the same holes in here. This happens to be a Model A. It's a little bit heavier duty than the Essex, but I put coilover shocks from Speedway. They supplied those shocks, and it just worked out great. Then we've got this panhard bar here that keeps it left and right. And I said 4-link earlier, and I messed up. It's a ladder bar.
Ladder bar.
Yeah. So that's the battery was an issue with there's really limited room, and under the seat's even more limited. Under the seat of this, I've actually got compartments you could put stuff if you want to go drive this car somewhere. But so excess battery sent us this lithium, this small battery, and that thing I have yet to charge it. I have none. The little alternator, it's got the little mini alternator. It starts that big Godzilla engine, and it's just perfect. So I put a master switch here just to be safe, turn it off when we're in storage, like in here. But that's a little different. Ed's battery's up under the seat, ours is back here.
From what I remember, wasn't there on the rear end, you need to change the wheel pattern or something? I can't remember.
The wheel
or shorten it too? I don't remember what you did.
I was really excited when David told us what it was. I thought, okay, it's going to be just the right width. Well, it turns out it's not. It's like an inch narrow on each side, so a couple inches overall. And when I put the wheels on it, I made adapters and bolted the wheels on. So this rear end has the small Ford pattern, which is 4.5. This early Ford pattern is 5.5, I believe, 5 or 5.5, I think. So we made adapters, or I made adapters to space it out and change the bolt pattern. So these early wheels bolt onto this later style rear end, and it widened it out. And I really thought it would work, but it did. It worked out perfect. We had to have adapters anyway.
Yeah.
We just made them the right width. So it does have the same width, a little bit different in wheelbase, and we went down in front tire size to give it that modern ring. And that's something I was noticing, like John Athens tires here. You see the high black on the white wall. Well, Ed's is short, so there's very little black on the sidewall of Ed. If you look at the front of ours is short like Ed's, and the reason is because our front tires are short. So we're a couple inches lower in height on the front tires than the back tires. That gives it that more modern raked look. I really like it.
And then the windshield, this is exact. You can bolt on Ed with no problem if we ever needed to.
You could honestly bolt that windshield to Ed. Same bolt pattern, same holes, everything's the same. Our windshield's Lexan because we didn't have time to cut a glass one, but it's the same size. It sits in there same way. I didn't put a channel across the bottom. I did put Velcro just to keep from scratching the paint up. And then the steering column is from Speedway. That's a little...
This is really cool. Come and explain the steering and how it goes through the wall there. And
oh yeah, so you see down, let me move this cable. This is a little more modern than Ed's car too. This is the interface cable for the Holley electronics. And I was gonna hide the Holley dash, and I thought, no, let's leave it. We've got old and we've got new. So when you turn the key on, that dash lights up with the Holley stuff. So we also, instead of, if you notice, Ed's steering wheel is like right here. I couldn't possibly, or you, drive
definitely
that car.
me, no.
It's not only down here, it's back here. So Alex got in it and it was even tight on her. I don't know how Ed ever drove the thing. So I had to raise this one up. For my knee when I'm in here is right here. And I had to raise it up enough to clear my knee. And then when it's in gear over here, your knee don't fit. It's my knee is right here. So first gear is miserable. Second gear is a little better. Third's good. And fifth's real good. But so we had to work around that.
Yeah, for me, since I have shorter legs, it was easier to shift. And you made the extra room here for me, so
Yeah, well,
I got in it, so I was happy about that.
I've got size 13s, I think,
Yeah.
on, and they barely fit in there. But there's another Speedway item, is that the chain-driven gear. I think that's a 10 or 12 inch drop. So the U-joint goes in up here and it comes out down here. And so I was able to bolt that to the firewall and make the steering column in a more ergonomic location.
That thing's amazing, yeah.
It is.
That allows you to do that. I think it's
Otherwise,
pretty
that
good.
steering column's going to be almost milk
Yeah.
truck. It's going.
You have no room in there.
It puts everything really
Yeah,
tight.
when you came up with that, I thought, oh, that's awesome.
And
The
then-
other thing I really liked about it is that I wanted a 5-speed. And we got Tremec, got the Tremec tranny in here. Is it the TX, I think?
What is it they call? I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I forget what the name of it is.
But it's the
But
new 5-speed
it's- yeah.
transmission. So
And that thing shifts. I mean, this thing's a
Really
dream
good.
to drive, honestly.
it is.
Yeah, that's like one of the highlights too. And also how you got the shift knob the same color.
It's the thing. We were looking at that shift knob. We had some shift knobs, and they were black and whatever. And we kept looking at the pictures. And Ed's has got that brown, what they call that plastic back in the day, Bakelite. It looks like
Bakelite,
Bakelite
yeah.
plastic. Well, Debbie got on eBay or got to searching and found this, and I believe it's Bakelite too. It's got the V8 emblem in it. If it's close to the same as his
Yeah.
is just a little bit smaller, but it's appropriate for the car. And then the banjo wheel so when we were here, I was talking about what are we gonna do for steering wheel? You know, I gotta come out, I find an old banjo wheel, but we don't want that big diameter.
No, yeah.
So, Speedway stocks the right wheel. Look at that. It's
That was really
perfect.
good.
Of course, we made our own logo because Ed's has actually got, and it's kind of cool if you look at this is made out of billet. I made this on the lathe, and then Alex programmed it, and we put that emblem in there that probably Meg digitized from some artwork that I've had forever. But if you look at Ed's, he did similar to that, but you can tell that it's cast. So that's made out of a casting. You can see the porosity in it and the lack of shine. But look at the spokes in the steering wheel. It's like a whatever. I don't know exactly what the wheel is. I assume a 36 Ford Banjo or something like that. And very common wheel. I don't even think that's right, but that's what they did back in the day. 36, 37 Ford, they had a Banjo wheel. Well, that's a copy, kind of a modern interpretation.
Yeah.
Look how cool that looks. That's
Just like everything we do. Also one of my favorite things is the license plates.
Yep, look at that.
We have this license plate that we ordered. It's really cool, which ends in 300. We have the original that's $299. And it kind of
That's
ties the whole.
California issue.
Yep, 1951 California. It's original there. So we thought that was fun. So we like that. You got the tail light perfect.
The taillight on ours is a Model A taillight. This one here is a boat trailer. I don't think that's what Ed had.
That's
on
not the
there.
original.
No.
No, I remember that.
If he had, Ed would have done it when he did it, it probably was a Model A taillight would be
Yeah.
my guess. So we used the Model A. I could have went to the parts store and got that, but that
That's
just
not
doesn't
original,
look, no,
though.
it don't
Yeah.
look right. I'm sure over the years there's been a few things changed, like the gas tank's probably not the one he had originally, but it's close enough. So basically, all in all, I'm really pleased with seeing them side by side. Everything that I thought would be different is different. I knew what was going to change and what was going to stay the same, but the mix of the two, I'm very pleased with.
Came out terrific. I mean, from just the idea sitting on that wall at SEMA, we were leaning over and thought about a project car, what would we do? And the amount of time, I mean, that we actually confirmed that we were going to do it and work with Speedway was February, I believe, or when we were out here measuring everything. To
Yeah,
seeing it at the SEMA show in October was unbelievable.
It was, and I'm glad that it's done, but I'm glad that we created something that will hopefully live on long past us.
Oh,
that
for
one's
sure.
obviously going to be around forever.
Mhm.
And I think this one and that one needs to stay together. It was never intended for credit for us. This is a tribute to Mr. Ed himself. I mean, the car was built to, just tell how badass the guy was. You know,
Yeah.
Nobody wants to take that car out of a museum and use it. This one can be taken out. We can take it to shows, take it to the lakes, have a good time. It's just a tribute for the man himself and the company, and they'll be around and hopefully together forever.
Yeah, what my goal really when we started this was to show that we're still a family company. We still have the heritage. Ed is still around, and even though we're a modern company, we still have that same spirit of being a hot rodding company. Like I'm going to the tracks, I'm going to the races, just like he did in the beginning. And I felt like for the legacy of the company, we need to do a tribute to it, but with modern stuff, modern builder, and see what we could come up with. And I think I learned an awful lot, and I think people from the videos will learn an awful lot. And really my appreciation for what Ed did and how trailblazing they were and what this car really stands for is amazing.
Now instead of seeing it over there and thinking that's just an old junky old hot rod, now you look at it for what it really is.
Yeah,
You know,
instead
history.
instead of like when I was young and would go into the warehouse and it's sitting there and dusty and all that stuff, it's rightful places out here.
Hey, I did that too. 392 Hemis are all over this place. There's one right there. There was a day when I would look at those things and think, what a boat anchor. And flatheads, I bought my first business. I bought an old man out in a repair shop, and the back room was full of flathead parts. And I opened the back door, and they went out the back door. And he come by, and he was heartbroken. He said, "Are you throwing those away?" And I said, "Well, why would I want flathead parts? You know, we wanted big block Chevys. I was young and dumb." And he took them all with him. Well, it's the same with that car for you. You've learned what that car means and what its value is, and I've learned to appreciate all the other
And
stuff.
how advanced it was. It's amazing how advanced it really was. I mean, for hot rodding, it's like the Bell X1, right? When Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier. This is akin to that as far as how ahead of its time it really is.
I
and
believe
the influence. And I did not understand that at first, but I definitely do now. The other thing that I really learned a lot about is hot rod building. You know, grew up with race cars, so you get a new chassis, put an engine in it, at the end of the year, the car goes. You know, you never see it again. But the attention to detail and things, it's art. That's a piece of art to me. Like I don't look at it as the same as I look at it at a race car.
Race cars are function over form. There's a lot of form to them because of required aerodynamics and things, braking, things of that nature. But that car was built aesthetically. It was a lot of form and then blended with function, and it did both very well. That's what I like about them. I mean, it's kind of like our modern version of drag racing and drag week and what have you. We want a very fast race car, but we want to be able to use it all the time. We can drive it on the street. So it's just an advance. You know, it's a natural process. Everything evolves, and this is kind of the evolution of that right there.
And I think like one of my main things starting out too was to work with you guys, of course. And I knew you were good. I didn't know you were great at what I consider. Because not only did you build it, but well, there's a lot of guys that could build this, I would say, but not in less than a year. That's a whole another level of what you accomplished.
That's called dedication. I mean, we were dedicated to get it done.
The hard work, it's unbelievable that went into it. But how it looks, the finished project, I do feel that it deserves to be in the same room as Ed's car.
Well, I'm glad, and I'm very honored that it is. So it's a very special day for me.
It's pretty cool. It turned out awesome. I couldn't be more happier with it. And I hope you're proud to have it in here, and the family thanks you, and it turned out way better than we thought.
Well, I'm very proud, and I thank the family. That's very important. I'm looking forward to our next outing with it, and then I'm looking forward to staying someplace like this.
Well, yep, that's the plan is that we're going to take it to the lakes, and hopefully Ed is feeling good enough. We'll get him a ride in it, one last ride. If not, we'll have it at the shop so you can come out and see it in more detail. SEMA was so busy, but I'm glad that he got to put his hands on it and talk about it. But it does need to get to California and get on the lakes, and then come back here and
Get that
be on display. Yeah, I mean, the thing is this, if you look at this is 76 years ago, and this is us as a business 76 years ago, us now as a
There you go.
business.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think the history will just keep on going from here. So I'll be glad to see them side by side for many years. So thank you very much.
For including me in that. It's very, very
Thanks for
special.
all your hard work.
You're very welcome.
All right, guys. Well, that's the T. It came out way better than we ever thought it could, and we are so proud to have it here at the Museum of American Speed. The Isky family, the Speedway family, and the Taylor family, we work together so well, and we couldn't ask for more. So thank you.